Our ancestors were all pagan. It's just true. We might not want to admit it, but this modern era, this modern generation that's decided that it can choose what it thinks from a buffet line is something we want to practice or something we want to believe, that just did not exist. It's wonderful to know that there were no atheists in our past, practically. And there certainly were philosophically minded people, but atheists were rare. What are these differences between Christianity and the other forms of paganism that existed out there? So when I was in Taiwan at the age of 19, I was very excited about going to the Buddhist and Taoist temples. And one of the things you'll see right away, yeah, are the flowers and the fruit and the incense that's being offered. It's very, very common not only to see that at the temples, but also to go to anyone's home. You'll see shrines or altars that will have fruit, incense, and lamps that might be lit at all times. This is extremely common. So the topic today is paganism and Christianity. And what we want to look at are sacrifices. So one of the things that we notice worldwide, our ancestors, all of our ancestors, were in the general sense pagan. And someone who practices a form of paganism in whatever manner that is, it appears to have very, very common outward forms. In fact, the forms can be so common outward that certainly it gives a signature to the human experience in terms of how we, all of us, have acknowledged gods and have made offerings or sacrifices to them. If anybody's read the Bible, especially the Old Testament, we are familiar with very famous stories such as Abraham and Isaac. And if you're not familiar with that story, in that particular story, Abraham, who is faithful to God to a fault, who doesn't have his son until he's around 90 years old. When he has his son, the son that he's been waiting for his whole life, God then asks him to make a sacrifice to God. And on the way to the mountain, Abraham and Isaac head up, and Isaac looks around because he's familiar with sacrifice. So that says a clue immediately when we think about this particular era that they lived in. They understood sacrifice, and it involved an animal. Also, one of the factors that we see is going to a sacred place. In this case, they're being called to go to the top of a mountain. And mountains have always represented, both literally and figuratively, places where we get closer to God. So here's Abraham taking Isaac up, and Isaac's wondering, we have the wood, but where is the sacrifice? We understand that the Middle East culture of the time of Abraham around them were practicing sacrifices. So back to Taiwan, one of the things that was very, very common was incense. When I was also a Zen Buddhist, certainly there's no animal sacrifices, but there still is this offering that's being made through incense when we are practicing our sitting Zen. And the Japanese and Chinese generally if they have a Buddha in front of their altar, are going to also offer fruit and things of the sort. If we scan over during the time of Apostle Paul, just as Christ had been crucified and Paul had began his missionary journeys, during his second missionary journey, he famously ends up in Athens. He engages with the philosophical culture there, but also notices that there are absolutely thousands of shrines scattered throughout Athens. And this place, in fact, might be the most religious, and the people might be the most religious of any he's seen. At the same time, there is this other philosophical practice going on that had, not just come from Plato and his school with and Aristotle and his school, but new schools had emerged of philosophy at that time that he was also engaged with. But he's noticing the fact that these people are having altars and shrines, and there are all kinds of rituals being offered to all the named gods. So then we really come back to this question, well, what makes Christianity different? Well, first of all, what makes them the same is the fact that on appearance sake, everybody's making offerings. And that's just really interesting, because if we come from this modern generation where we've decided as an individual what to put on and what to not put on in terms of beliefs and ideas and practices, many of us have basically rejected all of those practices and imagine that we, like in a food buffet, can pick and choose exactly what we decide is meaningful for us. So what really are these differences between Christianity and the pagan practices? Because on the appearance, it looks as if they are the same. And I think one of the most important observations to make about this is in our human past, our ancestors, all of them, if not most of them, unless they were highly philosophically minded, and even them, they still had certain practices and rituals. But on the whole, everybody was practicing some form of offering and sacrifice to gods. So then it comes down to, well, what does that mean for the modern world, with so many of us deciding what it is that we think is true and what we think is a practice that we wish to do. And we don't have to participate in a culture that's forcing us into certain ritualistic practices, offerings, and sacrifices. What is it we're doing here in this modern world? This has been an introduction to this topic, and I look forward to exploring it more deeply with you. I'd love to hear your experience and observations concerning paganism in the modern world, Christianity and its contrast to paganism, and we'll look forward to exploring this more deeply next time.